This is a presentation about soil entitled Soil, Where to Begin. This presentation was presented for the Grayson County Master Gardener Intern class. This recording will be made in multiple parts, and this is part one, explaining and talking about soil. My name is Becky Hoganson. I'm a member of the Grayson County Master Gardeners. Much of this presentation is based on lectures from my professor at NCTC, Horticulture Director Ashley Hartman, and her lectures on the living soil and on composting. Just a little bit about me. I'm a retired school elementary librarian. In my retirement, I've enjoyed learning about gardening through Master Gardener classes and hanging out with plant friends. I also took a lot of classes at North Central Texas College and enjoyed learning there. I spend a lot of time in Colorado in the summers and hiking through the wonderful forest and the woods and observing the beautiful, rich soil that is there and learning about plants. All right, so what is your garden story? It's always interesting to learn what people have to say about their gardens. This is my garden here in North Texas. This is in April, mid-April, with spring popping and everything just coming alive. I've got the garden planted, lettuce is growing, radish is kind of struggling, but squash is in the ground getting some blooms. The arch there is a champanelle grapevine, makes wonderful grape jelly. And so a lot of different things kind of happening. This garden definitely takes changes, a lot of changes. A house was built right behind me, so that has affected my sunlight. The layout of my garden, I initially had a circle with the beds, and I've had to kind of make adjustments with the new shed, but that's what the fun part about gardening is picking your places for plants and exploring your design. The other part of my yard had a swimming pool that, swimming in-ground pools and the issues with that. So finally I filled in that pool, and now I have a great big flower bed. I was able to put in a storm shelter too, because, North Texas, we might need that. Last summer was my first year for the garden, and wonderful tomatoes in this section, and had okra too. I've used wine bottles, kind of create a path, fun path, and to make it kind of attractive in the garden. I like exploring. I left up some of the okra stalks to let peas kind of climb up it, and it's kind of fun to experiment and try little different kind of science experiments in your garden. This is my grandson with last year's harvest, watermelon, and we had our cucumbers and, of course, wonderful sunflowers too. My gardening motto, and this is something that I really and truly believe in, is you do you. It's your garden. Enjoy your garden and do it the way that you want to. So I could tell our interns is there are no garden police. Well, maybe unless you're in an HOA, but typically, no. Nobody's going to be coming and telling you what to do in your garden. Your garden's for you. It's your adventure, your journey, and enjoy it. Take time to just enjoy it. Okay, there's a quote I found from Charles E. Kellogg. There can be no life without soil, and no soil without life. They have evolved together. And that's what this presentation is all about caring for our soil, because we want the most healthy soil that we can achieve. Why this topic? Why is this important? Well, good soil is definitely our goal. That's what we're shooting for, because good soil creates nutritious plants that is good for healthy humans. So it's definitely a cycle with everything working together. And you can think about, lettuce. If lettuce that you grow in your garden in the spring, like I'm getting to harvest right now, just tastes amazing compared with the lettuce you buy from the grocery store. It's just not there. It just doesn't have the taste, just doesn't have the flavor, and it definitely doesn't have the appearance either. I've read some reports that say that you can compare produce today with produce from 20 years ago, and it's not as full of vitamins and minerals, what you're getting in the grocery store. So if we can grow our own and we're growing our own food in good soil, then we know what we're getting. We know what was put into that soil, what chemicals. We know if we're using organic practices, and we know that we're getting good, healthy food. We should be nurturing our soil more than plants. All right, through the series of recordings, we're going to be looking at different things about soil, and it's not just dirt. My teacher said that dirt's what's under the bed, but we're talking about healthy soil, healthy soil. So we'll be looking at other ways that you can explore to learn, structure of soil, different soil types, ways that you can improve your soil, famous master naturalists, because it's always interesting to learn that those came before us, horticulture methods, composting, lessons from the past, current concerns, and what's the buzz. So let's talk about ways to explore. Being from Texas, of course, our Grayson County Master Gardener program is part of the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Agency. So that's who we definitely report to and who we defer to for information. Their website is excellent, all kinds of information that's going to relate to Texas. So here's the website for you to go to, and you can definitely look there and find just about anything you want to know. Research-based information. Podcast, I highly recommend the Beginner's Garden Podcast. It's hosted by Jill McSheehy. She's in Arkansas, and her gardening zone is very similar to what we have here in North Texas. She has excellent guest speakers and covers a wide range of topics in her podcast. So if you enjoy podcasts and if you just would like to listen to something gardening related, traveling down the road or just at home, her podcast is accessible in anywhere that you find podcasts. Landscape Guide here in Texas, we highly recommend The Best of Texas by Texas Nursery and Landscape Association. And this is what landscape people use to pick out different plants, trees, shrubs that they place into landscapes. Texas is a large state, and we have different growing areas all across our state. But this book will break down for you different plants for different areas of our state. What I've been reading as a book is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmer. Fascinating book, absolutely fascinating. So if you're looking at the connections between us and nature, I highly recommend this book. For Facebook, of course, follow the Grayson County Master Gardeners if you live here in North Texas. Magazine, there's an excellent source for information in Texas, is the Texas Gardener Magazine. And they put out planting guides for fall and spring. They will tell you what to do each month in your garden, in your yard, taking care of your trees and shrubs, and just a lot of information relating to gardening here in Texas. Now, the book that you see pictured here is called Teeming with Microbes, The Organic Gardener's Guide to the Soil Food Web by Jeff Lowenfels and Wayne Lewis. This is an amazing book that really gets into talking about healthy soil and what all lives in the soil and why we need those wonderful organisms living in the soil. So you can find this book on Amazon, at your local library. Put in a request for this book. I've also heard it may be on Libby too. A wonderful, wonderful book to learn about soil, and it is written at a layman's level so that you can understand what these scientists have to tell us. Now let's get into the structure of soil. Now let's look at how soil is formed. Well, it all starts with rocks. Geological events like volcanoes, glaciers, flooding, and landslides. Weathering, forces that have decayed rocks with wind, rain, snow, sun, and the cold. Also chemical forces, too, that are affected with the water, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and chemicals produced by the fungi and bacteria. The biological forces where the mosses and lichens have produced acids to create fissures in the rocks that fill with water and freeze, roots that force rocks apart. all of this is combined to help create soil. Now, it's not something that happens quickly. It takes hundreds and thousands of years to form the soil. Soil is comprised of organic and inorganic material. Now, on the inorganic side, this is where we're going to have what comes from the rocks, what's broken down. And it's minerals, comprised mainly of minerals. 45% of soil particles is mineral. Now, organically is only 5%, very small amount. The organic is going to be the humus from dead and decaying plant and animal material, soil microorganisms, protozoa, bacteria, fungi, and other organisms like earthworms, nematodes, and insects. And this mineral and organic is half of the soil particle. The other half is going to be comprised of air, 20 to 30%, and water, which is 20 to 30%. If air is missing, maybe it's been pushed out by water, like such as floods, then soil becomes anaerobic, decompose and putrid smell, and you've probably experienced some soil such as that. So in this graph we can see how minerals are a very large part of our soil, and that will play into part in what we're going to be learning today. Now let's take a look at the different soil layers. There are different layers of our soil, and we'll go through each of those, starting at the very top. Now, the very top, I think this is my most favorite one, the O horizon, is the organic layer. Now, the organic layer is at the very, very top, and this is so important in our soil layers. It's usually less than 2 inches. It's comprised of things that are decomposing, and its job is to protect the A horizon, the topsoil layer. So organic layer is comprised of grass, twigs, leaves, can have bugs crawling in and out. It becomes compost. If you take that O horizon and you till it under, then it's not there to protect the A horizon. So when we talk about no-tilling later on, this is where it becomes rather important. The O horizon protects the A horizon from wind, compaction, sun exposure, erosion, and also depletion of nutrients. So you can see O is awfully important. Right below that is the topsoil, which is the A horizon. This is the most highly treasured and most productive layer. It's the best for cultivating plants. Mountains have very little topsoil, but good agricultural soil, maybe even 25 feet or even more. Construction, when they build houses and buildings, they often remove that topsoil. We can't necessarily amend our soil. If you buy a place, a new house, and they've taken off that topsoil, you can't really create topsoil. You'll probably have to bring in some. It needs the O horizon for protection. Now below that is the B horizon, which is the subsoil. And it contains materials that have leached, that have come down from the top. Roots can extend down into that subsoil. It's often composed mainly of clay. Trees have roots that they can bring up the nutrients from this level, and they share those nutrients through their leaves that are shed. The C horizon is the parent material, and that's the partially decomposed parent material coming from the bedrock down below. Okay, get down to the O horizon, and this is where the rocks are so important. That's your parent material. And the parent material will affect the type of soil that you have. It could be acidic or alkaline. Can definitely affect that. There's also an E horizon, which is a subsurface that has been deposited by the movement of water. So if this is some soil that has water flowing over it, that's when the E horizon will come into effect. Now here in North Texas, and I'm sure in other places do too, we sometimes experience hardpan. And that's when you have that A horizon that is completely exposed to the elements. It has no horizon to protect it. And you'll see real hard soil, hard earth, and it gets a white, crusty layer on it. Things don't grow well there at all. Don't grow at all. That's hard pan, and that's soil that hasn't been protected. Now, when I told you about my garden and what I had in my swimming pool when we filled it in, they initially filled in the pool with fill sand, and it was kind of heavy in clay, a lot of sand in that too. But I did have them top it off with some more expensive topsoil because I wanted to make sure that I had some good soil for growing plants in. I've created an horizon on top of that with mulch, and last year when my tomato plants died, I smashed down those stalks and I smashed down the leaves. I kept all that plant material and put it back down to help create an organic layer on my soil. In just 1 teaspoon, soil contains more microorganisms than there are people on Earth. It's alive. Now let's take a look at all the amazing, wonderful things that can live down in our soil. What's making it be alive? The macroorganisms. These are the creatures that we can probably see. Herbivores, they feed on the living plants. Snails, slugs, insect larvae, termites, beetle larvae, mice, and grubs. The dendrivores, they feed on dead and decaying plant tissues. Mites, snails, beetles, millipedes, springtails, earthworms, spiders, scorpions, centipedes, earwigs, crickets, termites, slugs, ants, and roaches. Carnivores, they feed on other living animals, includes mites, springtails, centipedes, snails, slugs, flies, moles, ants, spiders, centipedes, scorpions, and beetles. Now for the teeny tiny things that you need a microscope to be able to see, the microorganisms. Bacteria. Bacteria hold the highest amount of nitrogen in their bodies. They supply nutrients that plants need. The most plentiful of the microorganisms, they feed on organic matter. Some fix nitrogen. Most are found in the top 1 inch of soil in that O horizon. The fungi, they lack chlorophyll. They don't make their own carbohydrates, but they break down organic matter. Mycorrhizal fungi. They enlarge the plant's root system. Nematodes, the most numerous multicellular creatures, can be destructive and beneficial. Some enter the roots, some don't. Some are beneficials, some control termites and grubs. And to see mycetes, the higher form of bacteria, traits of simple bacteria and true fungi. Now this is the little white threads that have that earthy smell, and they make minerals available to plants. Have you ever been digging in your yard in some soil and you saw these little white threads in the soil? First time I ever saw that, I thought, oh my goodness, what is the matter with my soil? I must get rid of this. Turns out, that's good. You want that. This is one of the best things that you can create in your soil. So we want that to make good, healthy soil. Makes that wonderful, wonderful, earthy smell. Mycorrhizae are the symbiotic relationships that form between fungi and plants. The fungi colonize the root system of a host plant, providing increased water and nutrient absorption capabilities, while the plant provides the fungus with carbohydrates formed with photosynthesis. It's definitely a relationship with all of these things working together to help create good, healthy soil. This is a video that shows through a microscope all the many different creatures that are living down in our soil. I'll post the link for this video in the comments section, and you can click on that to watch at your leisure. Now let's take a look at different soil types. Now we'll look at different soil types. A lot of people have sandy soil. Soil is the largest size particles. Being large, it has large pore spaces in between. This provides good drainage, but it doesn't hold water. Also, because it doesn't hold water, it doesn't hold nutrients as well either. Sand is visible to the eye. You know that when you get sand in your shoes, you can definitely feel that. If it's wet, you can form it into kind of ball, but it's not going to hold that shape. It's not going to stay as a ball. Now, in contrast, clay holds large portion of nutrients and it also holds water. Does not drain easily. It has very small pores that are easily compacted. Clay particles are flat, tiny, tiny, and flat. Now, especially when it's wet, it can be compacted very hard. And if you have clay soil, you know, and you'll feel it when it's really hard, hard, hard. Silky smooth to the touch. Now, if you form that into a ball when it's wet, it's going to stay in a ball shape. Silt, you think of in a creek bed when you see where water has flown over. It's going to be an in-between sand and clay size. It's small, much smaller than sand, but larger than clay. It is easily transported by water and air. Air can blow it. It has a flowery feel when it's dry and slippery when it's wet. And in that photograph, you can picture that being in the bottom of a creek where water has flowed over it. It does have more nutrients in it than sand does, but not quite as much as clay can hold. Now, what we want is a wonderful mixture of these. We want loam. It has an ideal mix of sand, silt, and clay. Now, that creates a suitable growing medium for most plant varieties. There are some that prefer more sand and some that prefer more clay. But especially if you're thinking of growing vegetables and fruits, a combination of these three is ideally what you want. Now, you can also, in the soil comparisons, sand doesn't have charged ions, but clay is negatively charged, so it would adhere to positively charged ions in the soil. We'll be talking about how to improve your soil, and one thing I'm going to mention while we're here is if you have sandy soil, you don't want to add clay to that. Or especially if you have clay soil, you don't want to add sand to that because it will become hard like concrete. Soil particle sizes. And this shows a good comparison about the different sizes that the particles are. Your coarse sand is going to be large, very large sand particles. Very, very large. And then fine sand and medium sand. Those are both very, very large. Then you have silt particle, and that's pretty tiny. It's just this little bit right here. And then clay is that teeny tiny dot you can just barely see right there. So clay particles are considerably smaller than sand particles, quite a bit smaller. Now in this, you can think about with sand, when we're talking about how sand doesn't hold water and it doesn't have nutrients. So if you have a jar and you fill that jar with some marbles and you're able to drill a hole in it, say it's a plastic jar, and drill some holes in it, then pour some water in that jar. The water's going to flow right on through that. The marbles are not going to hold that water. Well, the same thing with nutrients too. They're not going to hold the nutrients. They're going to flow right on through the bottom of the jar. With silt, with a smaller particle, it's going to hold more water. It's also going to hold more nutrients. Now the clay particles being so teeny, teeny, tiny and being flat, they are definitely going to hold water and going to definitely hold nutrients too. So how do you determine what type of soil do you have? Well, this is a real simple science experiment that you can do at home. All you need is a jar, some of your soil, water, and a little bit of Dawn dish soap. So take a jar, kind of a large, like a spaghetti jar, and mark it into thirds. You want 3 lines. So mark it in half first and then divide each of those sections. So you have 1, 2, 3 different parts. Now fill your soil to the very first line, and it can be lumpy. You know, if you have clay, that's fine. Just get the soil up there to that very first line. Then add water to the top line, so you'll have 1/3 soil, 2/3 water. Add just about a half a teaspoon of Dawn soap, and the reason for that is to help break up the surface tension because you want to be able to get the soil all mixed up with the water. All right, get your soil in there, your water, your Dawn dish soap, put your lid on, and then shake, 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 shake. You want to get all the soil mixed up into the water so that there are no clumps left. Then take your jar and just gently swirl it for a few minutes to let the sand start to settle first. So pick it up, swirl it, and set it down, come back to it a little bit, swirl it just a little bit, and then set that jar down and just leave it. After about 24 hours, you'll be able to see all the levels settle. So this is what it looks like when you start. When you're finished with your experiment, this is a finished jar to see how it has all settled. Now you'll see in there the different layers, and I know it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but if you hold it to light, you'll be able to see some pretty distinct layers into your little soil test jar. Sand will be at the very bottom because the sand particles are the largest particles, so they'll settle at the very bottom. Then you'll probably see a very thin layer of silt, or you may not see that at all. And then above that will be the clay particles. So the very top and the last to settle, that's why it takes 24 hours, will be the clay particles because they are the tiniest particles. Now this will give you just kind of a general idea of what the different layers, how much you have of your soil. Then take that and kind of give it a guesstimate. You just say, like, if I have 50% clay, 40% sand, and 10% silt. You know, you want it to add up to 100%. And again, you don't have to be precise. This is just kind of guesstimating. So guesstimate what you think your percentages will be. Then there's this chart that you can use to graph across to see what the percentage of your soil may be. So we'll just use kind of an example. So if you did your little soil jar test and you found that you had 30% clay, then what you'll do is take this line and look for the clay, and you're going to be going across. So if we said we have 30% clay, we're going to come right here to the 30% on the clay, and we'll be sliding over with one hand. Then take your other hand, and so you have 30% sand, so find your sand, and you're going to be angling it up, so we'll be going up until we intersect with the 30% on the clay, and it looks like it's going to put us right there in the clay loam. 30 and 30 is 60, but the 40% is going to come from the silt right there. So that would give us an idea that we have some clay loam soil, and we'll know that what we're dealing with. Soil pH. What is it? You hear that mentioned, and people are talking about growing different plants in different areas and why it might do well and why it may not. Well, a lot of times it has to do with the pH of the soil. pH is a measure of the acidity or the alkalinity of a soil, concentration of hydrogen ions that are in the soil solution. The soil pH affects the amount of nutrients and chemicals that are soluble in the soil water, and therefore the amount of nutrients that are available to plants. Some plants need a more acidic soil. You think of azaleas and blueberries, and some need a little bit more alkaline soil. Where I live here in North Central Texas and Grayson County, we tend to be pretty neutral. We fall right there in that sweet range to the 5.5 to 8, which is ideal for plant growth. In East Texas, they have a little bit more acidic soil. That's why they have the beautiful azaleas that you'll see in Tyler. People try to grow those here in Grayson County, not near as successful, and it has to do with the pH of our soil. The pH does affect photosynthesis. At too high or too low pH levels, the enzymes in the plant stop working or they slow down. they can no longer carry out photosynthesis in the cell to their full potential. Thus, as the plant's pH drifts away from the best pH, the rate of photosynthesis will decrease. Now, there is a scale for pH which you can use to kind of determine what kind of plants, what grows best in different places. The scale for pH shows the vast range that it can cover. Things that are acidic, battery acid, that's going to be way down here with the low numbers. Lemon juice, that's very acidic. Cola, orange juice, and things that you think of as being very acidic. On the alkaline side, that can also be really harsh too. Lye, think of lye soap, bleach, and ammonia. Those are very things that can be very toxic too. So either side of the pH scale can be really, really tough on plants. Now, to raise and lower, there are things that you can add to the soil to affect the pH. If you add sulfur to your soil, that will lower the pH to get it down here to make it more acidic. Some things that people add are cottonburr compost, acidic version of that, pine needles, think of East Texas again. To raise the pH to make it more alkaline, you add lime. Now, both of those products you can buy at garden centers, things that you can add. One thing to keep in mind is it's not a one and done. So if you want to grow azaleas here in Grayson County, you're going to have to mend your soil, but it's not a one thing. You're going to have to add to it every year so that you're able to maintain azaleas. Looking at some different plants that do well in different areas. Here a little bit leaning more to the acidic side. We have bunchberries, crowberries, roe, twisted stalk, twin flower, tea, asters, things that fall more in the neutral range. A lot of different plants. And a blueberry needs a little bit more acidic, a little lower range there. Blackberries follow. We're able to grow blackberries very well. They follow definitely in that neutral range. And then if you get on up into the more alkaline side, you're going to find a whole list of different plants that will do a little bit better more in the alkaline side. And that concludes the first part of this soil presentation. The next part will be about improving soil. So just watch for my YouTube channel to see the second part, improving soil. In this section, we'll be learning about things that you can do to your soil to make it more usable for your garden needs. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you learned something about soil.